Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision to prohibit the term honour crimes in all official publications, to extend extraterritorial jurisdiction in certain circumstances for crimes committed against UK citizens, and to make provision for the repatriation of the bodies of women who are victims of aggravated murder, to allow an investigation into suspicious deaths. Mr. Speaker, language matters. The use of the term honour to describe a violent criminal act committed against a man, but more often a woman, can only be explained as a means of self-justification for the perpetrator. It diminishes the victim and provides a convenient excuse for what in our society we should accurately call simply murder, rape, abuse and enslavement. Mr. Speaker, I want us in this House to send a clear message that the excuses end here. Even more than that, the term assumes that violence, in particular against women, is culturally sensitive, a sensitivity which allows the perpetrator to further coerce the victim from seeking help, and intimidates the agencies of the state from pursuing and prosecuting these violent crimes. The principles of treating every victim equally and with dignity, and our law enforcement agencies responding to every crime with equal vigour, are threatened when a separate set of cultural norms and practices are accepted for some victims of domestic violence. We have one law in our country, one law, and it applies to everyone regardless of their heritage and their faith. This bill builds on the progress that has already been made by the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, the Tackling FGM and Forced Marriage strategies, coercive control laws, and the brave work done by our Prime Minister to introduce the Modern Slavery Act. And I want to place on record my special thanks to the Minister for Vulnerable People and the Secretary of State at the Home Office, as well as the Foreign Secretary and their teams for their continued support and time. Between 2010 and 2015, 11,000 incidents of crime where the term honour was applied were recorded in the UK. Members of this House, during their constituency duties, will have encountered cases in which the police and other agencies, including the CPS, have been reluctant to tackle domestic violence in minority communities for fear of being accused of racism or of provoking community unrest. Indeed, the CPS has acknowledged that it needs to improve its understanding, response and support to victims. Victims such as Sarbjeet. Sarbjeet was abused throughout her marriage. She was battered by her husband and treated as a domestic servant. Sarbjeet was terrorised, going to bed, not knowing if she would be alive the next day. She was told that the honour of her family was at stake if she complained, and that police would just treat her as a number. Sarbjeet told me that she didn't feel alive, but nor was she dead. When she did sum up the courage, she called Crime Stoppers as well as the police. She risked her life in reaching out. But after statements were taken, she was returned home to her abusers because it was just a cultural misunderstanding. Shockingly, the evidence of her abusers was believed over hers. Sarbjeet was reduced to going to a temple, falling to her knees and begging for help from community leaders. It was a desperate act from a desperate woman. She was sent home again and told to think of her family's honour. She was trapped, and once she had been let down by the authorities she trusted to protect her, had nowhere to turn. Fauzia's husband beat her and secured a second wife. Like many domestic violence victims, she was nervous about asking for help. When she did call the police 3 times, she told me she was treated with indifference, as it was dealt with as a community issue, an honour crime. Not as she hoped, as bigamy and assault. She wanted equal treatment and support under our law, not culturally appropriate interventions. In what way does the term honour describe these crimes, except as the pathetic self-justification of the perpetrator? It is a term used by those that see women as the property of men, whose decisions, lives and loves belong to the family, the community or religious institution. This bill commits us to describing these crimes for what they really are and being clear to the police, the local authorities, the community leaders and CPS and the victims themselves that cultural and religious sensitivities are not a barrier to justice. Mr. Speaker, we have no record of how many British women are taken overseas by family to be abused or killed. However, we do know that when it happens, their assailants believe that their crimes are beyond the reach of British justice. This bill will change that. It would extend the provisions of the Modern Slavery Act so that if someone is taken from the UK to anywhere in the world to be exploited, the offence can be investigated in the UK because the planning and part of the trafficking took place here. Sita Kaur was born in the UK and Sita Kaur died in India. Sita was subject to domestic violence throughout her marriage. Sita was terrorised by her in-laws and was told to give her eldest son to her childless brother-in-law in India. She would be coerced into travelling to India and would be forced to return home without her son. Sita would beg until she was reunited with him. Her husband and his family saw this as a question of honour. There is no official confirmation as to the cause of Sita's death. Her husband said it was a heart attack, but her family bore witness to bruising around her neck and upper chest and intended to bring her body home. But before they could, in the dead of the night, Sita was cremated by her husband. Whilst in shock and grieving, Sita's family reported her death to the Indian police as suspicious. But they saw this as a family matter. They tried to reconcile the families, even offering the return of Sita's children, British citizens, in exchange for dropping their allegation of murder. When that didn't work, the case was simply closed. This bill extends extraterritorial jurisdiction to domestic violence and I hope will re-emphasise our responsibility to investigate murder aggravated by domestic violence. At present, these victims do not have the same level of protection, commitment to investigate, to prosecute, or to provide desperately needed support to victims and families. Crucially, the bill ends the near impunity enjoyed by the perpetrators of domestic violence who often, with the complicity of foreign states, seek to escape justice by taking women abroad to continue committing their crimes. Mr. Speaker, in this country we make no distinction based on faith, heritage or background. There can be no exceptions to equality of treatment before the law. There can be no exceptions to the pursuit of justice. The words we use and the actions we take must reflect the values that we hold dear.